Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I'm a financial mediator and business valuation expert in St. Louis, Missouri. Today, I'm speaking with Peter Anderton. He helps senior executives cut through the noise to transform their organizations, their teams, and their lives, and he's based in the UK. But welcome, Peter. How are you?
I'm great, Melissa. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
This is awesome. So today we're discussing an interesting topic, which, I, over the course of talking to you, have struggled with this as well. But we're talking about a concept called deliver the team, not the result, and how leadership mindset needs to kind of shift in some capacity. And I want to start off that you actually talked about this topic on a TEDx talk, which will show the link, but, kind of start us into what does even deliver the team, not the result, even mean, right?
So the thing with leadership is that we've massively overcomplicated it over the years. And it's a real source of frustration for me because so much research has been done. You'd think we'd have made it clearer. But all that's happened is we've just come up with hundreds of different models and theories and definitions. And if I go and speak to, 50 different experts, I'll probably get 51 models, theories, and definitions. When you try and piece it all together, you end up with some sort of complex chemical formula that you've got to be a university professor to understand. And my view is that is just so wrong. There's a really subtle but very, very important mindset shift that needs to take place. In fact, there's two that need to take place for you to be able to create a business that is not totally dependent upon you. Because this is the curse of the founder here. You start off, you do everything, and you cover it all. And then you start to recruit people and expand the team, and it becomes a bigger and a bigger business. But you're still having your finger in all of the different pies, trying to piece everything together. And I remember one of my clients, I sometimes describe him as cursed, but his curse isn't really what you'd expect it to be. His curse is that he was better at everything than his team. And it wasn't conceit. This guy, you meet them from time to time, don't you? They're just brilliant at everything. They're utterly very frustrating. Put the rest of us in our place. But he could just do so many different things. And everything came to him because he made everything better. And it's like, you see those films where there's a master chef in the restaurant. And everything they'll quick test a little bit more salt, or they'll change the garnish, or everything comes through them and they somehow make it a little bit better. And this was his problem. And he realized that he was focusing on delivering the best possible result all of the time. And he was completely missing the potential for his business because he needed to be looking at it from a very, very different perspective. And if you focus on delivering the result and purely focus on delivering the result, I'm not saying that results aren't important. The issue is you become the bottleneck, and you end up, it's so easy, isn't it, to come in like the superhero with your pants on the outside to try and fix everything. But all that happens in that situation is if you come in as the superhero, you will create a team who constantly need rescuing. And then you'll be frustrated. You'll be struggling. You'll have a business that isn't actually worth what it supposedly is on paper, because at the minute you come out of the equation, everything starts to fall apart. And nobody wants to buy a business where if the leader steps out of the picture, everything unwinds. That's no help to anybody.
Yeah. And that's where we had kind of started the conversation, because a lot of times when we see these founder owners are approached by somebody coming in to buy their business, they start to see, wait a second, you're everything, like you're everything for the business. And they probably egotistically also believe that they are everything about the business. But, the shift is over time. And even I struggle as well because I am always visionary. I'm always looking for the future, but I need to lift up my team so that people understand that there's more than just me facilitating. Like this ship isn't moving in with one person, even if it appears, in that capacity. Like, is that really limiting me if I'm not showing that, no, there's a whole marketing team, there's a whole, execution team, there's a whole analysis team, And these people are very important, even if they don't want to be front and center, right? And so that's kind of what you're talking about. But is it even bigger than that, right?
So there's when I was a kid, there was a TV program in the UK called Crackerjack. It was probably it's one of those things where you go back and watch it, you think that's absolutely awful. But as a kid, obviously, I thought it was fantastic. And they had a quiz on the program called Double or Drop. And they'd have 3 children, and each of them would be standing on a podium. And they'd be asked various quiz questions. And every time they got a question right, they'd be given some prizes. So as the quiz goes on, they're standing there holding more and more prizes, and it's getting heavier and heavier. And every time they get a question wrong, they get given this huge cabbage. So they're holding a mixture of prizes and cabbages. And the way you were eliminated in the quiz wasn't by getting a question wrong. It was by starting to drop things. Okay. And what would happen is, they're trying to hold it all together, answering all of these questions. And that's what running a business feels like, particularly when you're the founder, because quite frankly, it's quicker just to give them the answer. It's quicker just to but then you're carrying another thing and another thing and another thing. And now you're just barely holding it together. This is why I say that ultimately you get this stuff right. You don't just accelerate results by building a high-performing team. You get your life back. So there's a huge shift that takes place for the founder, both financially, the environment they create, and actually the whole experience that they've got. Because if they're standing there like the Crackerjack kid, holding it all together, they haven't got the mental bandwidth to deal with the stuff that matters most. When they're with their family or their loved ones, actually they're hardly ever there at all. Their mind is somewhere else all the time, trying to solve the problems that are constantly coming up and firing through. They've got all these loose ends, and they've got all these plates that they're spinning, and they never get to the end of their list because they're focusing on delivering the result. They're not focusing on delivering the team. And therefore, nothing will shift. It will only ever be reliant upon them, and they will always be the bottleneck. And their business will never reach its full potential, ever.
Yeah. And I think I deal with a lot of energy work and trying to, move through the world, being very hyper present at whatever I'm doing. Most of my, phones are on do not disturb. I'm I'm looking at the things that I need to be doing when I am doing it and not distracting. So that means family and business. But I think what you're saying is that you also want things to be moving, right? So that they're not just sitting on your plate when you clock back in and you're like, oh, okay, now I'm ready to look at this again. And nothing has exited. So now I have to work twice as hard and continue this. But when we were talking, there's 2 things that you were very specific about. And I thought it was genius, but I also had to really try to listen to it more. We've spent more time talking outside of the podcast than we have even, just for fun kind of. But the first thing that you talked about, and I hope it doesn't go over your head, block your face. So you might have to sit up straight for a moment. But it's the first mindset shift is going to be, it's not about you, which for a founder, I'm like, what are you talking about? Right? What do you mean it's not about me? I built this, I'm the ideas. And I work with a lot of business owners that are very powerful individuals. And they're like, it's not about me. No, the business is all about me. So what do you say when this mindset shift is, it's not about you? What does that mean to you? How can we understand that a little bit better?
So it's the foundation for all things leadership. Everything leadership begins with, I call this rule number 1 of leadership. It's not about you. It's not about your solutions. It's not about your way of doing things. It's not about you rescuing everything. And it's not about your ego. The critical thing to recognize is about them. If you want to run a lifestyle business where it's just you doing stuff, go for it. Absolutely. But if you're looking to build something that's bigger than that, and ultimately looking to exit at some point with a business that has a decent valuation, then the business has to have a life beyond you in any scenario. And the critical thing to recognize with rule number 1 is that it gets across to us the message that It's not actually your job to deliver the result. And again, I'm not saying results aren't important, but the critical mindset shift that needs to take place in a leader's thinking is it's not your job to deliver the result. Your job is delivering the team who deliver the result. And it's a subtle mindset shift, but it's an incredibly important one, because until you get to that point, then anything leadership, which is about strengthening and building a better and a more effective team and getting them pointing in the right direction and getting them working together, all of that stuff, it ends up being like an extracurricular activity that you squeeze in at the end of the day, maybe if you have time. And let's be clear, because you're doing all of the other stuff to get the result over the line, you never do have time. So you end up with a team that is nowhere near where you want them to be. You're constantly having to plug all of the gaps, and it becomes a never-ending cycle. You're like the crackerjack kid trying to hold it all together with all of this stuff. You've got a team who've either got, there's two extreme possibilities. They've either got a huge amount of capacity and you're not accessing it, or they're running around completely ragged, hating what they're doing because you're not giving them any clarity. You're half giving them stuff to do. Or when you ask them to do something and you haven't actually explained clearly what it is you want, and they come back and it's not what you wanted, you just say, no, go away and do something else. I worked with a client once, and they put this challenge back to some of their senior management, and they called it "Bring me another rock." So they'll come along with a rock, and they'll say, "No, not that rock. Bring me another rock." And you can create this cycle of either utter exhaustion and frustration in your team, where it feels like it's just so pointless, or you're in the scenario where they've got shed loads of time on their hands, and quite frankly, the only thing that's worse than too much to do is not enough to do. So in terms of engagement and performance, it still has the same end result. And it's all totally and utterly dependent upon you. And until we create this shift where we realize, actually, my job is delivering the team. For example, we've all hit a scenario where there's a crisis that hits and we need to roll up our sleeves and we need to jump down there in the trenches with the team. I am not against that. I'm not saying we should be aloof from the team when times are hard. However, if you are always the one in the trenches with the team, who's working out how to get out of the trenches? Nobody. And that's your job. That's nobody else's job. That's your job. And if you're not doing that, you think you're helping the team, and all you're doing is failing to do what really matters. And therefore, the whole situation is perpetuated again and again and again. And that's the key point here. You've got to create that shift in your thinking. It's not something you squeeze in at the end of the day. That's what your job is. And the great thing about rule number one is there's all sorts of facets that come from this. So take, for example, imposter syndrome, which it doesn't matter how effective a founder you're dealing with. Everybody's struggling with that in one way or another. Well, the great thing about rule number one, it's not about you, is we think people are thinking about what we're doing and analyzing it and criticizing it all the time. And the bottom line is they've got their own stuff going on. They're not thinking about us. Okay, it's not about you. Okay, right. You barely feature or sit in their scheme of things and in their bandwidth of everything that's going on. They're not thinking about, well, she didn't do a very good job of that, did she? Or that was a bit rubbish. I'm not sure about that presentation. None of those things are going on. They've got all of their own stuff cracking on, spinning around in their heads. And yet we can constantly end up, leaders can constantly end up second guessing themselves. But rule number one is really empowering. Rule number one also says, good news, you don't have to have all of the answers. Now, that's actually really, really powerful. It doesn't only just take a whole lot of pressure off you. It's okay to rock up and say, I don't know the answer to this one. I can see partial answers, but not the whole thing, because the most enlightened leaders know that the world is too complex for one person to have all of the answers. Right. The best leaders will draw it together from a range of different sources. That's one of the great reasons you have a team, because you've got a whole range of different perspectives that you can pull together. That's if, of course, you've recruited a team with different perspectives to you. And then you can draw that together and create an overall solution. So there's so many angles we could look at with rule number one. We could go on about it for hours.
Well, and I think a couple of things that I think are interesting is that I've learned, a long time ago, not to take things personal. Like everything is walking around with a mirror of what is happening in their own life, right? So you're like, oh, that person did this to me. No. That person is in their own little bubble, and it just kind of bounced off of your bubble in some capacity. But I think the interesting piece that, and if founder owners are listening to this, is that the business value is really based on you, right? It's based on you over time, increasing this, having this visionary thoughts, coming up with these products that are just amazing, and these teams and these results. Like, that's what builds the value, right? And there are thresholds to like get beyond $1 million in revenue, and then it's 10 million in revenue. You have to kind of layer out. But at the end of the day, when you go to sell, if it is still highly contingent upon you, it will decrease the value. Like, people will see it as a negative, even at the beginning in the growth phase. It's like, this value is getting more and more and more because this is like this visionary leader. And then you go to sell and you're like, what? They're like, oh, it's too reliant upon that leader. It's too like, they're everywhere. They're everything. And it's this crazy dichotomy that is like, hold on, you loved me for all of this time, and now I go to sell and you're going to lower the price because of me. And like, how have you seen some of that play out? Because you're working with leaders, like you're working with them shifting into this like saleable entity that is not reliant, and that takes a hit on your ego. Like, what do you mean? Right? Like it's not about me. Oh, okay. But like, aren't I the whole thing? Wasn't this founded on me? Like, how do you as a leader that's listening deal with this kind of ego hit? Like, even if you're not egotistical, it's going to be kind of like, well, what am I worth then? Right? Like how do you talk to leaders about this shift?
So I think this is a concept that's easy to get logically, but you have to get it emotionally. You have to get it to really grasp it and take it forwards. And, I've worked with a wide range of leaders when it comes to, founders, business leaders. I've worked with senior business leaders in the corporate world as well that are finding themselves grappling their way through this challenge. I think the key thing is, I remember one particular time many, many years ago, and I worked for 3M in a previous life. I was the organizational development manager across the UK. And one of the exercises we were going through was a reorganization. Part of this reorganization, the basic premise we were looking at is we wanted the decisions to be made at the lowest possible level in the organization. And we ran this whole analysis process. It was incredibly detailed, identifying all the tasks that were taking place in the organization and bringing them down closer to the coalface, if you like. It was a really, really powerful exercise, apart from the leaders who were struggling to let go of things because they're like, well, if this goes further down the organization, what will I do? And my response was, all the things you're supposed to be doing, but are not doing. And this is why I would describe this as a mindset shift. We build our identity, if we're not careful, founders will build their identity on the business, on the results, on the offering, on the product, on the amazing things that they're doing. And if you want to create real longevity, if you want a valuation that goes beyond, that doesn't rely upon the business owner, the shift in the thinking is to recognize that, again, it comes back to exactly the same point. The deliverable that you're driving, the result you're driving is the team. Are you turning? That's what I'm focusing on. So I can shift my identity from the results that my business is delivering and whatever, turnover and whatever it is that I'm aiming towards. But in reality, if I shift my focus to attention to what is the team becoming so that they can deliver the results that get over the line, then I've got something to really work on. But that's the part that usually gets swept aside. But that's the part is the most important part of any business leader's job description is building the team. And what we need to do is turn the whole thing on its head. So it's not just, well, okay, I'm doing all these projects and I'm doing this deal over here and I'm working on this. And when I get that sorted, then I can have this conversation that I know I need to have with somebody that will get things to a better place. No. It goes the other way around. I'm having the conversations. I'm giving the feedback. I'm listening to the team. I'm doing all of these things that will get to the team to the point that they are delivering these things and they're taking forward and making them happen. That's where I've got to focus my energy. And a simple way to start is using the Pareto principle. So the 80-20 rule, a teacher will spend 80% of their time on 20% of the pupils. It came from Italy, didn't it? 80% of the wealth was in 20% of the individual's hands. So what we're looking at here is you will get 80% of your results from 20% of the things that you do. Yeah. Now, if you look at that from a time perspective, that's 90 minutes a day. Now, that's if you're doing a 40-hour week. Let's be clear, a lot of people are doing a lot more than that. But if you took 90 minutes a day and said, you know what, then I've got all this project stuff, I've got all these deals, I've got all these other things going on, but I'm going to protect this 90 minutes. And come what may, those 90 minutes are protected for working on my team, to deliver the team that deliver the results. And I won't let anything else get into that time. Then you start to create a shift. And if you're wading through so much chaos that you can't do 90 minutes, then make it an hour. Right. Or if you can't do an hour, for goodness sake, give it half an hour a day that you will guarantee to spend on investing in your team. And you might find that maybe it starts with one particular individual in your team, because if you invest some time in them and they have greater clarity and you help them play to their strengths and they're more fired up and you've got a stronger working relationship with them, well, the good news is they'll be able to take something off your plate. Mm-hmm. So that then frees up time to say, do you know what then? Now that I've got that person up to speed, now I've got 45 minutes a day that I can actually focus. Where can I start to focus that elsewhere? Still maintaining the work that I've done with this individual, but how can I then build on that and start to bring others into the view so that we can deal with it? Or maybe at the other end of the spectrum, maybe that person that isn't performing that I need to be having some serious conversations with, but I'm pushing that around my plate and not having these conversations because I'm kidding myself that I'm too busy over here doing the results and not actually focusing and giving the time for these other conversations. But I would build it up layer on layer, and you can't try and do it with everything in a big way at once. Just a little bit here, a little bit there, this individual, that project, build it up from there.
Well, and I think that, like we've found, and obviously I have smaller teams, but we have like different partnerships and groups, and having, like a 30-minute meeting every single week or every other week is really so that, and when I'm hyper focused, like I'm there for that 30 minutes, it's really saying like, you're important. Like, I know that you don't have, like, you can't get a hold of me as easy as it should be, because there's a lot going on. But for those 30 minutes, like what are your issues? What are you struggling with? How can I be of assistance? Can I do it immediately so that you have that login, that link, that, that document that you've been waiting, like whatever it has been. And how do we facilitate things so that you don't get stuck? And we do a lot of transparent so that somebody can see that something is there, but like really putting intention into you're important, you're part of the process. How can I be there to support you? I think has really changed some of how we work together. But as we move into the second piece of this is where you kind of threw me off, right? So we were like, okay, I totally get it. It's not about you. I totally understand. But what's the new mindset that you tell people now?
Well, the new mindset follows on from what you were saying. So you were talking about the fact that, yes, I need to invest in my team. I can give that time. I can give them focus. I can help them understand. So often our team aren't delivering what we need them to deliver, but we haven't actually invested any time in them. That's the scary point. You can end up with the founder who's bouncing around all over the place, not really settling on anything, and then they're frustrated that their team aren't grabbing things and owning them and making them happen. Well, what happens is the team become a reflection of the leader. So, and the critical thing to get your head around is that when it comes to changing behaviors in your team, you can't actually change anybody else's behavior. Okay, you can only change your own. So the second mindset shift is it's only about you. And I need to qualify that. I need to explain a little bit about what's going on there, because if you want your team to get their act together, you have to start by cleaning up your own act. It's too easy for the leader to say, this would be great if this team was delivering, but whose job is it to deliver a team? Well, that's your job. That's rule number one. So if you're, if you as a leader looking, if you can't get my words out today, if you as a leader don't like what you see in the team, then look in the mirror, because they will absolutely become a reflection of you. And if you want a different response from them, the question that you need to be looking at is, how on earth do I need to be behaving to get the response that I want from them? What conversations do I need to be having? How do I need to be listening to them? How do I need to be showing up each day? Because, of course, never underestimate the impact you have just about how you show up. All of these things together, if I create a shift in my behavior, well, then I'll be able to engage a shift in their behavior. Yeah. There's a really neat model. John Maxwell talks about five levels of leadership, and I'm not a big fan of leadership models, but this one is actually very, very powerful. And he says level one leadership is where people follow you because they have to. Okay, and that's where you get the absolute minimum. If somebody's only working for you to collect the paycheck and they've got nowhere else to go, then here's the question then, Melissa, how much will they give?
Mm-hmm. Not a lot.
What do you reckon? Pardon? Not a lot. Yeah, the minimum, whatever they can get away with. Okay. Level two leadership is where you've got a deeper level of commitment from them. They'll give you more. Level two leadership is they follow you because they like you. And just to be clear, I'm not talking about trying to be everybody's best friend. That's not helpful. Okay?
Right.
But we've all worked for a manager we liked, and we've all worked for a manager we didn't like. You give more when there's a relationship. So now we've got a deeper level of commitment. Level three leadership is where they follow you because you deliver. And you're somebody who follows through on your commitments. You say you're going to do something, you do it. Things are better because you are there. And there's a degree of consistency that's coming through from that they appreciate and they value. So based on what they see in terms of what you're delivering, you get a deeper level of commitment from them. Level four leadership is a really interesting one because now you're getting a very, very deep level of commitment from your team. And if you think back in terms of your own experience, you'll have thought of this yourself, that if you think of a manager that you've worked for in the past that really helped shape you, they sort of sponsored you, they almost molded you into the person you are today professionally. Does somebody come to mind when you think of that?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. If they picked up the phone now and said, Melissa, I need a favor, and let's assume it's not burying a body in the woods, okay, what are you going to do?
Answer the call.
Okay. And the point is, you don't even work for them anymore, but the level of commitment you have for them is so deep that it transcends whether you're working for them or not. So that's level four leadership. They follow you because you've helped them grow. And I link that back to what we said about rule number one. Your job is not to deliver the result. Your job is to deliver the team who deliver the result. So if you've really helped them grow, you get this much, much deeper level of commitment. Now, let's just rewind back a minute. If all you've got is level one leadership, where people are giving you the minimum commitment because you're reliant on the fact that you're the founder, you're the manager, you're the one who can issue the instructions, you can command obedience, you think, okay, but all you get, of course, is the minimum. In that scenario, if all your team do is the minimum, then you're done for. Not only have you got a business you can't sell, but in reality, in terms of just being able to run the business and deliver for your customers, then you end up having to fill in all the gaps. You're back to the crackerjack kid, trying to hold it all together, and nothing moves forward. You end up just getting completely stuck. So level four leadership, where you help them grow, gives you a really, really deep level of commitment. And what would be great is if you could have some sort of remote control that you could zap, and you could say to a member of your team, well, I'd like a bit more from you. Thank you very much. Let's see if we can dial it up. The reality is there is no remote control. And in fact, I'll ask you the question, what is the only thing, Melissa, that's within your control to influence the extent to which they choose to follow?
My actions.
Correct. Okay. Which is why rule number 2 says it's only about you, because you can't change their behavior. But real leadership doesn't just rock up recognizing, well, it's not about you. It's not about your solutions, your way of doing things, about you rescuing everybody, or it being about your ego. It's not about any of those things. Your job is not to be the one delivering the result with your pants on the outside. Your job is to be delivering the team who deliver the result. Well, rule number 2 recognizes you can't change anybody else's behavior. You can only change your own. So we come face to face with rule number 2 and we see level 5 leadership. So level 5 leadership is where people will work for you with blood, sweat, and tears. They will give you everything. And with level 5 leadership, they follow you because of who you are and what you stand for. So it's very much like Gandhi's be the change that you want to see in the world. Rule number 2 is it's only about you, because that's the point at which if you focus on your behavior and how you show up and what you stand for, people will give you absolutely everything. And it completely transforms your business and your life and your valuation by creating a team that will deliver literally whether you are there or not. That's the difference we're talking about here. So really, we can sit these 2 rules side by side. Rule number 1 is the foundation. Rule number 2 is not a contradiction to rule number 1. If we said it's all about you, that is the opposite of rule number 1. That's the teenager who is the center of the known universe. Okay, it's all about that. But rule number 2 recognizes that, well, real leadership says, I'm going to stop waiting for everybody else to get their act together, and I'm going to start cleaning up my own act. One of my favorite quotes that really epitomizes rule number 2 was when Nelson Mandela said, I could not change others until I changed myself. That's what we're talking about here. So we stop waiting for everybody else to shift, and we start taking ownership and looking at our own behavior. And when we put rule number 1 and rule number 2, rule number 1 is the foundation. Rule number 2 is the one that really gets things moving. When you combine those 2, and obviously there's more, there's nuance, there's more we can do with it. There's elements you could pull out from all of these things. But once you've got those 2 things in place, that's when the magic really starts to happen. And it's all about mindset. And
it's a lot of deflection, because I think, when you're in this leadership power, like in this leadership role, you're like, oh, well, they're not performing, or, they can't do it as well as I do. Like, I know that, a lot of what we did is that I would have these huge visions and these, like, the complex, and I would be like, I need to explain these things to you. And then everybody would be like, it's just overwhelming. It's too much. So I would be like, well, let me record it. You can go watch it again. But it really was me taking the time to put it into a format that could be digestible, that really was like, okay, here's your pieces, right? Maybe you don't need to know, like, if you'd like to know the whole thing, that's certainly great. But, like, here's your role, here's your piece. Like, do you think that you can accomplish that? Do you think that that's, reasonable? And it was more that they were like, yes, I can take ownership of that. Like, I can do it. It's very clear, because they want to, I think, impress leadership, like, for the most part, even if they're doing the minimum, they want it to impress, whoever. But I think that, I've always studied leadership. I've always tried to be the best person or boss that maybe I did or didn't have in the past, right? And lead my team from a position of strength and authority and knowledge. But at the end of the day, is leadership simpler than, like, are we making it too complex? Are we, doing too much? Because, the world has changed since the pandemic. It's changed since AI. It's changed since technology, working from home, and leaders are struggling, but they're reverting back to these old ideologies, these old ways that worked in the past that really aren't whether it's generational changes it, or if it's really just like the world is changing. Like, I have these conversations with my father, and he's just like, people should stop technology, and they should, like, things are not like they used to be. And I was like, no, we need to understand that if the world changes, how do we change within it and accept it and move in that direction, or else we're really going to, like, hurt ourselves by fighting change. Like, where do you see either leadership could be more simpler, or what changes should we be making now so that we can be that future leader, so that we can be that person that when the business is sold, they're like, oh my God, you built something amazing, and yet it stands and it's solid, and you have these amazing people that love you, but are willing to continue with the vision with somebody else as well. Like, what should we be looking at as change in our leadership?
So I think there's three lenses that we can look at, and actually it's very, we won't have time for it, but it's very interesting when you take the two rules and then you start to look through these three lenses as well. But I'll just give them very, very briefly. We can always expand them at a later date. I talk about connection, potential, and reason. Okay, so connection, I needed to, Henry Ford famously said, get everybody moving forward together and success takes care of itself. Potential. Okay, you need the right skills and experience in the team. Reason, why should I care? Why should I get out of bed in the morning? And you need all three of those things in place. And this, again, is the key point. If you recognize the power of rule number one, you'll be investing in getting a team who are connected and working together. Because you could have star players. We've seen this in national sports teams, don't we? Star players, but they can't come together as a whole, so they're consistently beaten by lesser sides. It's about how do you then focus your energy into building a team who are connected and working together. And there's a number of things that you can do with that, which we'll come back to. Well, we won't discuss them in detail, but there's a number of things you can do with that. Building a team who are fulfilling their potential, who are at their best, and continue to grow on an ongoing basis. And then building a team who absolutely know where the goalposts are. And not only they know where the goalposts are, they care where the goalposts are, and they're looking to deliver. Because what happens then is you end up building a team that isn't just clear on what needs to be done. You end up building a team that takes up a life of its own. They start identifying things that you've not thought of. They start closing holes that you didn't even know were there. So they're not just doing exactly what you need them to do. They're growing up to a whole new level where they're doing what you didn't know that they needed to do. And that's the really
taking ownership.
Part.
We have like a whole, again, it's not as simple as it seems. There's a ton that goes into it. And I think we're going to have you back for another podcast to go deeper into this. So Peter, what if people have already seen so much stuff that they are interested in, and I'm moving it so that you can not be covered a little bit, but let's talk about how could somebody reach out to you? Is this more like speaking engagements for their firm? Is this working with leadership teams? What does this look like? And you also have a free resource. And if you have questions about this, great. We want to start having this leadership discussion that is transitioning, leadership roles and thoughts about it as really thought leaders in this space. And, I want to have you back. Absolutely. But right now, how would they contact you and say, you know what, I've already heard enough. I need this, because again, whenever we first started talking, I was like, shoot, I need this so bad, how would they come in and reach out to you? Right.
So there's two questions there. So one is, what do I offer? And the second one is, how do they reach out to me? So in terms of reaching out to me, there's perhaps three ways to look at this. So first of all, there's email. You've put my web address up there as well. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. There we go. That's coming up there. I'm pretty regularly out there on LinkedIn. So do connect with me. You can DM me very easily there as well. And I will run webinars once a month generally, and they're advertised on LinkedIn as well. So you can get more of that there. The free resource you mentioned earlier on, the Inspirometer. So www.theinspirometer.com. So you can sign up for that. It's a complimentary leadership self-assessment. Mm-hmm. And if you go onto that, you'll end up getting some incredibly useful feedback through a personalized report, and you can have it with my compliments. So that's the inspirometer.com. And that will also get you onto my mailing list. So, we can engage and make connection further down the line as well. So those are the ways I would suggest to get in touch with me. In terms of what I offer, there's three flavors to it. So there's working with senior leadership teams to get them fully aligned. When you get a team who are really lined up and all pulling in the same direction, there's very little that you can't achieve. The second layer is actually working one-on-one. So I coach founders and CEOs of companies with 40 million turnover up to billions in turnover. And then the third strand, which I'm going to be honest, this is my favorite strand. So if you want to talk to me about this, anybody wants to contact me about this, I run leadership programs that completely shift people's mindset. I'm tired of all the programs that are out there that just spout this model and that model. What I care about is, can you give me a program that changes the way leaders think so they can build leadership into the way that they work by building it into the way that they think, and get a fundamentally different result from their teams and from their business. That's very much what I do. So if anybody wants to get in contact with me about that, there's programs I can run for them either as open programs or internal programs. That's the key part that I offer.
Yeah, I love that. And I appreciate all of your time. And we've had a great discussion today. I've learned a lot. I have a checklist of things that I probably need to work on a little bit, but these conversations have been amazing, and we'll look forward. I think you have some presentations coming in January, like look at what he's providing on his website. And at the end of the day, I'd love to have you back. I'd love to dive deeper into this. Maybe have a couple other people join and have a roundtable discussion, because things are changing. And if you anticipate selling your company in the future and you don't address some of these issues, then buyers are going to use it against you, and they're going to ding the price. And so we see that happening all the time. It's great to be like the person for the business, but at the end of the day, if it's not going to monetize in the future, like is it all lost, right? So I appreciate you. We'll look forward to seeing you again. And thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks very much, Melissa. Great for having you on the show.
All right.